Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. This beautiful woman you see on the screen has so much in common with me, and I am so excited because she's got a lot to tell you. It's going to be weird for you to hear how I start the show, but she and I were both raised by lesbian mothers. Our moms left our dad for women, and our stories have compelled our lives. Katy, with her relationship with her mother, whom she still loves and adores, was brought to be the founder and president. She is now the founder and president of Them Before Us. And Katy, I already forgot how I'm supposed to say that, which is a 501c3 designed for
defending children's rights in the family. We've got lots of incredible organizations devoted to defending children's right to life. We defend children's rights on this side of the womb, namely a defense to the two people responsible for their existence. So any marriage and family issue, from definition of marriage to divorce, same-sex parenting, reproductive technologies, cohabitation, polygamy, adoption, anything that has to do with marriage and family, we look at it from the perspective of the best interest of the child.
Amen. Oh my gosh, shouldn't everything be? I mean,
Yes.
we say that, but we really don't.
Yep, everything should primarily consider the child first. And there's hardly one area of American life or policy where children are even considered, let alone considered first. I mean, much of the time what you're seeing when it comes to protecting children's life, family, mind, and body, even like COVID policy, put kids last. And so it's so critical that we rise up and defend them because they can't defend themselves.
Yeah, well, I want to dig right in real quick and say, I didn't found a 501c3 based on what I went through. Tell me, take us on that journey. Where did your life kind of begin, and how did this happen, and what made you go, and therefore Them Before Us?
Yeah, good. Well, my parents were married until I was 10, and then they divorced, had an amicable divorce. So I stayed in touch with both my mom and my dad. They lived very close to each other. I still got to see both of them. After the divorce, my mom did not leave my dad because she was a closet lesbian. It was, complicated, like a lot of divorces are. But soon after they divorced, my mom fell in love with and repartnered with a woman, and they've been together ever since. So all the way from my middle school years through high school, college, when I became married, had my kids, they've both been a really big, important part of my life. I'm very close to my mom. Whenever I was at her house, I split time, in their home. And I don't, if you Google me, it'll say woman with two moms, campaigns for traditional marriage. I don't have two moms. Nobody has two moms. Everybody has a mother and a father. I don't consider my mother's partner to be my mom, but I do consider her to be my friend. And it's very, very important. I hope that I make the top, 5 list of people that love them and are devoted to them and would lay down, my agenda, my life for them, for whatever they need. Like, I just feel very close to them. My kids have always known them. So a lot of what I'm doing is not a motivation of, oh, I was fatherless and I'm wounded and I'm angry, and not really at all, because I still had my dad in my life. What I'm doing now is really, it started when we started to have these huge national conversations about the definition of marriage. That's happened really right after Obama evolved on the topic of marriage in 2012, right, where he ran as a guy who supported traditional marriage twice. Soon after his election, he came out in support of gay marriage. And what I heard the media saying was 2 things. One, if you don't support this new, never before seen manifestation of marriage, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, you're a hater, your motivation is animus towards gay people. So that was a problem for me because, like you, I love my mom and I love her partner, and there's no animus. Yeah, there's no hatred that factors into the equation at all. And so that made me angry. And I thought, I'm going to speak up about this. But the thing that really made me angry, and this is what prompted me to finally get involved, was now this narrative, right, to nationalize gay marriage at the state level, legalize it on the state level and the national level, was this push to say kids with 2 moms or kids with 2 dads, they fare just as well. Or kids love having 2 moms or 2 dads, or they don't care if they have 2 moms or 2 dads. But functionally, what that means is kids don't care if they've lost their mom or dad. And I had been working with kids for decades. We had been doing youth ministry, junior high ministry, high school ministry, college ministry. My husband and I, ever since we were in college, I still run the youth ministry at church today. And I have yet to meet a kid. I've yet to meet one kid who did not care that their mother or father was gone. And generally, how those kids feel about their mother or father loss, whether it's to death, divorce, or abandonment, is grief. Deep, abiding grief. Wreck your life grief. Cut a wound into the center of your heart that never heals kind of grief. So to me, that is what did it, was this narrative, this sort of weaponization and politicization of children's most primal wounds to advance a political goal. And that is where I said, I'm going to get into this fight. I'm generally more of a peacekeeper, but that was enough to say, if you're going to lie about kids to their absolute lifelong detriment, you're going to have to go through me. So I started writing just on my own little blog about why marriage is a matter of justice for children, why marriage is not about adults primarily, and it's not about, for the right, it's not a religious liberty issue. It is primarily about the rights and well-being of children. And when we redefine marriage, it's an injustice for children because they will lose a mother or father to be in that new marriage. So once I started writing about marriage and family issues, or once I started tackling marriage, I suddenly realized that not just the debate about same-sex marriage, but the conversations about divorce, about reproductive technologies, about same-sex parenting, even about adoption, was obsessively focused on what adults wanted. It was all about the adults, their feelings, their longings, their losses, their identities. And what they wanted was king. And the kids just had to stick it. They just had to fit in with what the adults wanted, even if it meant losing a mother or father partially or completely so the adults could live as they please. So that's the backstory. I started Them Before Us in 2018 to advocate on behalf of children in the family because nobody else was doing that. There was no other organization that was looking at every marriage and family issue from the perspective of, what about the kid? Their rights come first.
Well, the obvious question comes to mind then, what did you say to your mom?
Well, I don't speak for my mom. I always say, I'm not going to speak on her behalf, but I will say that what I'm saying is mothers and fathers are not optional in the life of a child. And that's really what the modern family narrative tells you. That's really what the redefinition of marriage tells you, is mothers and fathers are optional in the life of a child. You could lose your mom, you could lose your dad, you could be raised by two completely unrelated people, and there's zero effect on the child, right? Biology doesn't matter. Love makes a family. Gender doesn't matter. All that matters is kids are safe and loved. So really what that narrative says is my mother is optional in my life. Yeah. That I could have been raised by two men and it would have zero impact on my identity, my formation, my development. And that is the most demonstrable lie for me and everybody else. My mother is not optional in my life. She is actually critical to my identity, right? I was just telling you beforehand that when I look at myself now, I see her mother. Like when I smile, I have the same kind of like heart-shaped cheeks that kind of flow into my chin. And I never saw that as a kid. But now when I look at myself on camera like this, I see my grandmother. I see her mother.
That's right. I used to see my grandmother, and I was saying to you before we went on, now I see my Aunt Mary. And I have one without makeup. Praise God for makeup. Thank you. I'm my dad. And it is something that as you age, you stare at yourself and you see that person and you realize this beautiful gift that God gave us in heredity. Because I'm not joking, it's going to sound like a joke, but when God created humanity, he could have created us to be born of eggs. But instead he chose that there is a mother and a father. I mean, it's a decision he made. He could have had us just like flowers, right? I mean, flowers are pollinated. He could have had people just popping up because in God's divine will, he could have done that. And he knew there was something bigger about the family because also no one, I'm going to ask you who you pray harder for, your mom or your kids. You're going to say your kids, right? I pray for my mom, but no one prays harder for you than your own parents. And so there's, I think, in this eternal value, God gave us parents so that I will pray for those kids. I will take a bullet for those kids. And as my mom would for me, and I pray for my mom and I pray for my dad, but not like I pray for my kids. And so there's this beautiful gift in
Yeah.
the family and in this idea that you're talking, the DNA, the heritage. It's a spiritual DNA as well. And we have rights and responsibilities. And I love that you're so voraciously loving and bulldogish about love and about this truth.
Well, when I first started blogging about this, one of the main messages that I had is I saw Christians compromising on the definition of marriage because they thought, well, I can't adhere to God's design for sex and marriage and love my gay family and friends. And then I saw the other side, right, where, well, if I adhere, I'm gonna major so hard on the truth about this is how God designed marriage to be, that they just shut their heart out to their gay family and friends. So my message, especially back then when I was doing a little less advocacy and a little more just let's just talk about the issues, is if you're a biblical Christian, if you care about the word of God, if you're serious about his truth, you must hold on to his good design for sex and marriage. And you have to hold on to the worth and dignity of your friends who identify as LGBTQ. And if you're serious about following God, neither of these are optional. Not only are they not optional, you have to do both. Not only do you have to do both, you have to do both with all your might. And the world will tell you it's one or the other. You can have one or the other. But God's word says you do both, and you do them both zealously. So we have to do it. It's challenging. I often talk about how doing both of those, advocating hard for God's design for sex and marriage, which is a matter of justice for children. Now you're advocating for the least of these. That is what adhering to God's design for sex and marriage and advancing it in culture, law, and technology. You are protecting the most vulnerable. You're protecting kids. That's what adhering to his design for sex and marriage is. Over here, being compassionate, loving, sacrificial, inviting to your gay family and friends, right? You're being the hands and feet to people that need to know who he is. This is hard. You have to do both, but it feels like you're straddling a fence that's a little too high. And you are trying to keep a tiptoe on both sides. And the temptation is to hop from one side to the other because it's so uncomfortable to stand in the middle. But you have to stand in the middle. You cannot just be on one side or the other. You have to do both.
That is so powerful. It is exactly what I tell people in terms of I do divorce. I save marriages, right? Of course, don't make your comment. It's not Christine Bacon that saves marriages. It's God through me. I hate when I get people a comment. They're like, oh, you're self-aggrandizing yourself. No, I'm not. Stop it.
God is using you to save marriage.
Exactly. And I shouldn't have to spell that out every time. But so I save marriages for a living, and in the thing in divorce, and you've got all these lies as research, which it's been shown that you just repeat the statistic. For instance, 50% divorce rate. Well, that's actually not true. It's just that we've accepted it because we've heard it so many times. The good news is it's actually much less than that, 40% or less. And that is because of how the data are calculated. They take into consideration the number of marriages in a 10-year census period, and the number of divorces, but they don't take into consideration at all marriages like mine, 40 years, I neither married nor divorced in this 10-year period. So when you add all those in, it's much less than 50. The sad part is fewer people are choosing to marry than did in the past, and more babies are born outside of wedlock than inside. So I teach people how to fight for their marriage. It's like, yeah, I know you're miserable. I left my husband for 4 years. I get it. I know what it's like to hate your spouse. But the best thing for your child is not you leaving, because the lies that they put out there is, well, it's better definitely if you have two happy parents for the kids. But the second best thing is if you have two parents that are apart and happy than together and miserable. No, it's not. Your children are the most selfish beings in the world. We are born selfish. All they want is for mommy and daddy to be in the same house. That's what they want. So I teach that.
I'm on the advisory board for Jordan Peterson's new project called the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. And it's pretty incredible. What they're trying to accomplish is what I call the righteous inverse of the World Economic Forum, the same level of global reach, but with principles of human flourishing, not principles of human control and human degradation, which is really what the World Economic Forum advances in so many of these cases. And I was able to write a paper for them, a 27-page research paper, sort of a position paper on marriage and family. And I said, if there was a child standing in front of you right now, if you are going to advocate on behalf of the true interests of children, not what the world says, a lot of times in these conferences or these forums, they'll march kids in and use them as puppets to advance an adult agenda. But if you really asked a kid, a 6-year-old, a 9-year-old, what do you want in life? What is it that would satisfy your heart? What is the biggest and most important thing to you in all of the world? 100% of children would say, I want my mom and dad to love me, and I want my mom and dad to love each other. That is what every kid wants. And we can paper that over with cultural mantras like, if the adults are happy, the kids will be happy, or the kids will be fine, or love makes a family. But none of those cultural mantras are going to negate the universal human longing to be known and loved by the two people responsible for your existence. We can technologically, and we are technologically splicing children, making them in a laboratory, mixing together gametes of third parties, sticking them in somebody else's womb or whatever it is. But you will never technologically negate a child's longing for the biological identity that only comes from their mom and dad. We can legislate away the reality that children come from a man and woman and have a right to be raised by that man and woman. But you will never legislate away a child's hunger to be known and loved by both a man and a woman, by their own mom and dad. There are these universal child truths that culture, law, and technology will either recognize or violate. And so we have to get very serious about advocating, understanding who children are, where they come from, what they have a right to, and getting very serious about advocating on their behalf and taking that into all the different areas of culture, law, and technology. One of which is divorce. We spend quite a bit of time in that paper, and we devote an entire chapter in our book, Them Before Us, Why We Need a Global Children's Rights Movement, to talking about the devastating impact that divorce has on children's physical health, emotional health, mental health, academic health, relational health. I mean, the kids are not okay.
Right.
They're not okay. And we need to get very serious about putting our finger on exactly why these adult decisions are damaging children in the long term.
You know what's even worse, which no one wants to hear this, and there's going to be comments, I'm sure. The second marriage. Because the children of the first marriage are forced to be made to feel that they must love this other woman. This is a heterosexual, right? Mm-hmm. That you must love daddy's girlfriend and call her stepmom or mom, or this is your family, and you must look at her children as your stepchildren. Yeah. You're completely unrelated. And children know inherently, and many times it happens specific, is that the children of the first marriages are kind of like collateral, because when the dad gets into this new second, and I will say fake marriage, because you can only be married once, it's not valid. So it's legalized adultery, whole nother show. So when your dad gets into this legalized adultery situation with a woman, or your mom, right? These children are told to accept it, and then this dad and this new woman create children, and the children from the first marriage, the only marriage, see this as, that's the family, we are the luggage. And
that's exactly right. We spend all of chapter 2 talking about why biology matters in the parent-child relationship, and there is mountains of data on the preferential bond and treatment from biological parents to their own children, and how children are disadvantaged by a step-parent or a cohabiting boyfriend or girlfriend. Not just disadvantaged, but especially in the case of an unrelated cohabiting man, that person is the most dangerous person in a child's life, statistically. Mm-hmm. There are heroic step-parents out there, heroic men and women who are filling the gap of a negligent biological parent, who deserve our recognition and who deserve validation. But there is no family arrangement that includes an unrelated adult that increases outcomes for kids. It just doesn't exist. If you want children to be safe and loved and invested in and connected to the people raising them, you are looking at the married biological family, period, end of story. And interesting what you just said is, do you know one way that divorce really impacts children is in their ability to form and maintain their own healthy marriages, right? When they grow older. So do you know if a child's own biological parents split, do you know how much that increases the likelihood that they are going to divorce when they get married? 45%, right? So it's a 45, it's almost right. It's almost half, 50% likelihood that they're going to have greater chances of divorce if their parents divorced but never remarry. Do you know how likely it is that a child will divorce themselves when they get married, that they will divorce if one of their biological parent remarries a step parent? Do you know how much that increases their likelihood of divorce? 91%. So you might think as the parent, well, I'm going to get remarried and I'm going to redeem this situation, or I'm going to give them the better picture, or they're going to really see what love looks like, or this is the healthy marriage that I'm going to show them, because I didn't have that before, or, they're going to have this new family. You actually increase the likelihood they're going to divorce by twice as much by getting remarried to an unrelated mother or father, an unrelated man or woman. So every story that we tell ourselves about divorce and the kids are going to be fine is a lie, is a statistical lie. What do kids need? They don't need happy parents. They don't need parents who are living their best life or finding their true identity. They need married biological parents. They need you to work it out. And you are fooling yourself if you think, no, I'm going to throw away the dad, or I'm going to move on, or we can't work it out. The kids will be fine. They won't be fine. You are choosing your own romantic libido proclivities over the rights and well-being of your children. And anybody that cares about this, get the book, Them Before Us. We talk about, in chapter 5, we go through the physical ailments. Children of divorce are more likely to, when they get older, have chronic illnesses, suffer from the common cold more often, have problems with their skin and their gut and their reproductive systems, are at higher risks for cancer. Children who lose their father to divorce, which happens in about 40% of cases after 2 years, oftentimes kids lose total contact with their father completely.
40% of the time?
40. After 2 years, in 40% of cases, children no longer see their fathers. Okay, that's what divorce does. It usually cuts out it often cuts out the non-custodial parent altogether, who is often the dad. So there was a study.
I work with those dads and they grieve.
Oh, they're wrecked. They're wrecked. I was just on a show called Timcast, which is a huge, very interesting political platform. And I was doing a culture war episode and debating surrogacy and reproductive technologies with a guy named Jeff Younger, who many of you guys probably remember from a couple of years ago. His wife cut him out of their children's lives and then wanted to transition his son into a girl.
Oh, is that the one where she calls the boy Luna?
Yes. Right. So I was talking with, sorry, I have a cat that climbed on my knee. So I was talking with him, and that's what happens. The courts side with the wife, the mother, in the vast majority of cases. They often can cut the man completely out of their child. He's still paying through the nose for child support, but he can't see his kids. So this is often what divorce does. So what happens when a kid loses their father to divorce? And there was one study done in 2017, children who lost their father to death, divorce, or incarceration, right? Those were the 3 ways that a kid was losing their father, according to this study. And what they found is, if you lose your dad to death, incarceration, or divorce, right? Divorce ranks up there with your dad's in jail or he's dead. What happened? They found that the end caps of a child's chromosomes, their telomeres, were shortened. Okay, so telomeres are responsible for health and longevity in all of our lives. So when you shorten a child's telomere, you're shortening their lifespan. You are literally making it harder for them to be physically healthy. And that is what they found, is kids who lost their father, it affected them on the cellular level. So this idea of, I'm going to get divorced, it's no big deal. If I'm happy, the kids will be happy. You are tinkering with your kids at the smallest level of their bodies. You are going to alter them forever.
I don't even know what to say to that. I'm still, right now, it's in my brain. I think I've heard it before, but I had totally forgotten that. I totally forgot. And so when I work with, so I taught at the university for 11 years, and I teach classes such as communication between the sexes and couples
Good.
classes. It's so much fun. And I would do activities, various activities where you'd have to reach out, and these selflessness and agape activities. And anyway, long story short, the children, even if their dads were in prison, they so many times a mom would say, "Oh, you don't want him, he's a dirtbag," blah blah blah. But they said, the kids said they even preferred having their dad, even if it was embarrassing visiting him in jail, but to know that he still loved them and was still in their lives and still wanted their best. And those kids still had healthier relationships than the ones who didn't have a dad at all. They wanted that. They still felt a sense of protection, a sense of love, a sense of completeness, knowing they had a dad.
There is something about your mother and father that only that person can give you. So, I used to be the assistant director at the largest Chinese adoption agency in the world. I'm an adoptive mom myself. I believe that adoption is a just society's response to children who have lost their parents. I am an advocate for adoption when it's properly understood. But I will tell you, there are things my son has lost for which I cannot fully compensate. There are things that I cannot give him. Most adoptees, and now that we have donor conceived children that we, children created through sperm and egg donation, and I say donation because nobody's donating, everyone's buying or selling. This is a marketplace of children that we're talking about. These kids who grow up without their mother or father, even if they've never met them, lost them at birth, lost them at conception, lost them pre-birth, lost them at conception. These kids long to know, and very often long to be loved by, the people who abandoned them or the people who donated them. Why? Because it's very hard to answer the question, who am I? If you can't answer the question, whose am I? There is something about our identity that we only get from those two biological adults who created us. And I've heard it said, and I think it's true, that those are the only two people that you can love without never knowing, right? You long to be loved by these people that you have never met. And that is true from my work with adoptees, and now the stories of kids created through sperm and egg donation, many of which we catalog in our book. We've housed them on our website. Read their stories, because the whole predicate for the modern family is biology doesn't matter, right? If biology doesn't matter, then I can do whatever I darn well please with these kids, customizing them, making them, separating them, because love makes a family and biology is irrelevant. But when we look at the stories of kids, we see from an identity perspective, and like we said, from a safety and security perspective, biology is hyper relevant. Now, if biology matters, that means a lot of adults need to reorient their life around the rights of the child rather than insisting that the kids fit into whatever romantic arrangement they're making for themselves.
Yeah, I get so angry there. Well, who is that public figure, the politician, the man who is in a fake so-called marriage with the other man? And then they made this big story about the daughters that they procured.
Well, it's interesting because you've got Pete Buttigieg.
That's the one. Oh, no, he's not the one that got the child, though. It was a different one, right?
So Pete
Go ahead.
Buttigieg and his husband had pictures of them in the hospital with these two newborns.
That's right.
And everybody presumed that it was a surrogate. I had presumed that it was surrogacy. Later, it came out that it was adoption. But it's very interesting to me because there was outrage, especially with people on the right. Oh my gosh, they're buying and selling children. This child needs a mother. Since then, there have been some prominent figures on the right who are gay and have also procured children with very much less condemnation on our side, right? Well, Dave Rubin is a very popular
exactly
person that's on the right who had created custom ordered children to motherless kids. And very few people on our side. You even had prominent right-leaning organizations like PragerU and the Blaze TV who were publicly congratulating him. Lots of Republicans publicly congratulating him. And so what do we want? What do we want? Do we want wholeness for kids, or do we want to protect our tribe? Are we going to get outraged when the other side does it, or are we going to be outraged on behalf of any child who's intentionally motherless? So, I mean, that's another reason why I think Them Before Us is has more influence than we deserve, because I won't swear, we're sick of the BS. We're sick of the political BS that says we'll get really, really angry about gay marriage, but we really aren't going to talk about no-fault divorce, which, on the numbers level affects a whole lot more kids than
Yep.
the Buttigieg family.
What I do. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. And so we are all about child protection. We insist that all adults, single, married, gay, straight, fertile, and infertile, recognize and conform to the rights of children rather than insisting that children sacrifice for adults. So that means that we make a lot of people angry, even people on our side, but it means that we're able to actually do some pretty impressive child protective policies, culture work, because especially the younger generation, they can spot hypocrisy. And there has been an awful lot of hypocrisy on our side of the aisle when it comes to marriage and family for an awful long time.
I have about 814 questions I want to ask, so I'm just going to spin my roulette wheel.
Yeah.
IVF. I have a family member who she had cancer, harvested her eggs, and she had a child outside of wedlock, and now she wants to give that child a sibling. And I said, well, you'd have to marry. Now, the first thing she did is she asked that child's father, as we commonly call the baby daddy, if he'd father another child with her, so that at least they have real biological siblings. Noble. It's like, yeah, but you guys should really work to get married and live in the same house. But that was good. He said no, rightly so, because he said, I want to live with my children. I'm not going to, he took his fathering responsible. So that's great. So now she is looking at the IVF, and I talked to her about sperm donors. And I said, this child wants to know who his or her dad is. And I almost gave it away. This family member's mother said, that's a long shot. Most of them are happy. Most of them, maybe it's just 1 in a million that's not happy. And I said, well, okay, first of all, I think you're wrong. Second of all, are you willing to gamble that child's happiness so that you can have a child? What if you get that 1 in a million that's miserable? You're still willing to take a chance. And they were both so very cavalier about it. Well, sure, they'll be happy.
It's not 1 in a million. It's 80%.
So that's what my question was going to go towards. Tell me some of the stories of the people, because you said your book talks about it.
Yeah, there's about 30 stories just in chapter 7. There's a few more, chapter 7, where we talk about donor conception. There's a few more stories in our chapter 8 about surrogacy. In the biology matter chapters, we talk about kids who are absolutely bewildered about their identity because they were intentionally cut off from 50 or 100% of their biological kinship network. This is so
diabolical.
Yes, I mean, it is. Like, it is the buying and selling, designing and discarding of children in the name of servicing adult desires. So I would say, read the stories of kids yourself. And I have got a book length that I shortened into a chapter length, and I dare you just read one chapter.
Tell us about one
chapter about the surveys and the outcomes of how kids fare when they are created in a laboratory and intentionally cut off from 50 or 100% of their genealogical identity at the moment of conception. Spoiler, they suffer. They suffer much more than kids raised either by their biological parents or adoptees who are raised by neither biological parent. I mean, these kids often are raised by one biological parent, and yet they suffer worse outcomes in terms of delinquency, trust and attachment issues, struggles to make sense of their own identity. There's the biggest study that we have is called My Daddy's Name is Donor, and it compares outcomes with just sperm donor kids and kids who are adopted. And these kids say they feel sad when they see somebody with their genetic parents. Adoptees are like 1/3 less likely to say that, 2/3 less likely to say that. So the kids who are adopted, raised by neither biological parent, feel better about their family structure than the kids raised by sperm donors who are raised by their biological mother. There's something about intentionally cutting children off from their genetic heritage. See, the thing about adoptees is they're being raised by people who are seeking to mend their wound. There is a wound. The people raising the adopted kids are seeking to mend the wound. The people raised by people who employed sperm donors, egg donors, surrogates, they're being raised by the people who inflicted the wound. They created the wound. They wanted the child to, they wanted to cut the child off from the relationship from which they are now suffering. So there's a massive psychological burden on these kids created through reproductive technologies. So I would really encourage you to say, before you make this decision, please consider the impact on the child by reading their stories and looking at the data that we do have on how these kids fare. And if she reads just that one chapter, just chapter 7, which is about 20 pages, we pack it full of stories and studies. If she chooses to move ahead anyway, she can no longer say she's doing it in ignorance. She will be saying, my desire for a child is more important than this child's fundamental natural rights. I am going to trade my longing for a biological connection to a child for a child who will have a lifelong longing for the biological parent that I cut out of their life. It is absolute selfishness. It is taking the burden that you're carrying, which it is a burden to long for children that you cannot have. But you take that burden and you say, hey kids, this burden's too heavy for me. You take it instead. You are offloading your burden onto the shoulders of children, and that's an injustice.
Deacon Harold Burke Sivers, who's an adult child of divorce, has said that on my show before. He said, divorce, and he's just talking divorce. He says, divorce is like putting your cross down and making your kids pick it back up.
That's right.
That's what you're talking about in all of these incidences.
Across the board, it's adults forcing kids to do the hard things they're unwilling to do themselves.
And let's just say this, as we're both Christians, you will have to answer to God for that.
Yeah.
And yeah, there is judgment. And don't make God in your own image, like God understands. Yes, he does understand. And he understands what he planted in you. And he understands that he asks you to carry a cross. And you're choosing to pass that cross on for selfish reasons. And I'm sorry, I agree with Katy. Absolutely. I would be devastated if I couldn't have kids. But I would not. I can suck it up. I can carry my cross.
You know, that is the thing that all of these things have in common, is someone is going to do the hard thing. If you're infertile and you can't have kids on your own, that's so hard. If you are single and wish you were married, so hard. If you're in a struggling marriage, I know, it's so hard. If you experience same-sex attraction, that's so hard. But someone is going to do the hard thing in this situation. Will it be the adults or will it be the kids? It's not that the hard goes away. It's you will do the hard thing or the kids will do the hard thing. And the answer in a just society is you do the hard thing. If you're offloading the hard onto kids, now you're acting like a child and you're forcing them to act like adults. And I mean, it's just so backwards.
Let's just say children, actually all of humanity, but people watching, let me just say this because I know I sounded harsh. Children adore nobility. When they see, as they age, they see the struggle that you went and you say, I carried this, but I carried it for you.
Yes.
Do you know what you teach them? Do you know the strength you impart in them? Do you know what they are capable of doing because you did that?
Well, and you know, we talk. I have another book that's coming out next week.
Hold it up. It just came out.
I just got it. Yeah. It's called.
That's why I don't have it.
Yeah. It's called Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City. And it's really just, how do you pass your worldview on to your kids when everything is against you? Right. So we've raised our 4 kids in Seattle. They have largely gone to public schools, which is like the great Christian sin. But really, it's like, you can instill your values in your kids, even if you're the only one. And, you know, we're not the only one. Thank God we've got an awesome church. But one principle that we talk about in that book that you just mentioned is you become what you behold. Whatever it is that you're looking at, you're going to become like that. And you definitely see that in matters of family structure. If you behold your parents divorcing, you're more likely to become someone who is also divorced, right? If you behold your parents working it out and sacrificing on your behalf, you're more likely to become an adult who also will shoulder heavy loads on behalf of the others around you. And so it is so important to be noble. It is so important to be sacrificial, because if you are not, your children will never be able to become somebody who is noble and sacrificial, because you didn't give them something to behold. Don't expect them to become something that you were never able to do yourself. So it's so important, you know, especially with, I would say it's most important in family structure. That is the part that I think is the most critical when it comes to passing our worldview onto our kids, is we have to model it for them. So yeah, you're right. Like, kids love nobility, and and they need to be able to see it in action in you.
Let's take it one step further, and the final step. You lug this cross of infertility your whole life. You lug this cross of same-sex attraction your whole life. You lug this cross of abandonment that you're not going to pass on to your children your whole life. And you're tired and you're sad and you just wish you had had some happiness, but you did it because it was the right thing to do and you don't want to pass it on to your children or anyone else. And then you die and you drop that cross and you look up. St. Peter cleans you off. The angels will purify you. And you look at God. And that's when he really says, well done. I am so proud of you,
Yes.
my child.
Mhm.
You did the hard thing. And for that, you will be rewarded. Because another thing is we think it's communism in heaven. It's not equal. There are levels in heaven. There are levels in hell. And this is theological. No matter if you're Christian or Catholic, there are Christian or Catholic, excuse me. Catholics are the Christians, original Christians, I should say. Is that the heavier the cross you carry on earth, the more proportionate your level in heaven is. Do this for the short 80-year lifespan, 90 years. The average female lives 83 years. Carry that cross for 83 years. And 10,000 years later, 100 years later, actually probably 5 minutes in heaven later, you won't care.
Yeah.
When you look at this lifespan and you will think, that was so short. You will be grateful you did the right thing. Do the noble thing.
Yeah, that's right. And, it's painful. All of these things are painful. All of them are sacrifices. None of these are trivial. Infertility is not trivial. Unwanted singleness is not trivial. Marital struggles is not trivial. Same-sex attraction is not trivial. These are some of the greatest burdens that adults are going to deal with in their life. The solution cannot be to burden children, right? That's the no-go zone. That is really where you get into what we're talking about, millstone around your neck territory. We don't cause little ones to stumble just because we're going through something challenging. So it is hard. And I'm not, when I'm not doing children's rights advocacy, I'm in my husband's office. He's a pastor, and we're counseling people with infertility and gender confusion and same-sex attraction and very difficult marital struggles. I mean, I'm not blind or
Right. We see abuse. We see the tough stuff.
it's so hard, but the solution can't be, hey kids, you do the hard work, because we're not willing to do it.
Yeah. So we've kind of beat up on the parents, them before us. So what are you guys doing? Where are you? How can people get you? Are you doing, what does it look like? Is it just talks and seminars? You got the book you've written. What exactly is it? Are you in lobbying in Congress? What?
Yes, we are doing all the things. The short answer is we want to change hearts and we want to change laws. There is a lot of work to be done on the cultural front in terms of talking about the importance of children's rights, correcting some of these dangerous and distorted narratives that you've brought up here. Really the importance of a child's mother and father, the importance of biology and the parent-child relationship, deconstructing a lot of the narratives about reproductive technologies, especially because it's being heralded and celebrated by celebrities. And there's a lot of work to right-size the conversation and center it around the child. But a lot of times, the other thing we want to do is we want to change laws. So how do we change hearts? I do a lot of interviews. I publish, in a variety of outlets on children's rights. We also have some curriculum coming out. We actually have one specifically for church small groups. Our work is largely natural law based, where it's social science, stories of kids. But we did create a curriculum just recently for small groups, connecting God's word and God's principles with the principles of children's rights and child protection in all of these different policy issues on marriage and family. That's going to be made available probably around the first of the year. So we also are going to start getting into the corporate world in terms of advocating for children's rights in the corporate world. A lot of the overhaul of the traditional family structure happens through things like HR departments and family building benefits through, healthcare benefits. But a lot of those family building benefits violate the rights of kids. We'll fly you over here to get an abortion. We'll subsidize your IVF or your surrogacy
Oh, we won't
costs.
pay for your adoption or your.
Right, right. And so we are going to create a children's first HR benefit for companies that want to honor the rights of children and prioritize the well-being of kids as they're recruiting and retaining employees. We want to change laws. We fight against bad bills that commodify children, that strip them of their right to their mother and father. We also have a bit of an ambitious plan. Next year, we're going to hopefully have the funds to really get our legal department off the ground. And we are going to do what we can to challenge Obergefell. Like, as far as I know, there's no other lawyers, there's no other legal organization that is trying to retake the marriage ground. And that's because it can't be done in the conventional sense, but we're going to do it in an unconventional sense. So we are doing changing hearts, changing corporations, changing law. We're taking these child-centric principles into all of those different areas. We have incredible collaborations. It's incredible that we're on the advisory board for ARC, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. We do a lot of collaboration with the Heritage Foundation and Focus on the Family and the Colson Center. So it's just incredible to be able to, we get to appear on a lot of large platforms and really influence the influencers, so that's an incredible honor. We are starting to help people look at all these issues from a child-centric perspective, especially when it comes to reproductive technologies, which unfortunately there's a little too much moral confusion even on our side of the aisle about that. So that's what we're doing, is we are going to center the child in all of these conversations and insist that all adults bend to kids rather than forcing kids to sacrifice for them.
Your parents know that you love them. How do they feel about the work that you're doing?
Oh my gosh, we're tight. I mean, because the message is moms and dads are not optional in the life of the child. And so my mom knows she is not optional in my life. I think the most dishonoring thing I could say to my mother is, you're totally inconsequential. Some random guy could have done just as good a job as raising me and giving me value and female nurturing, which is such a lie. My father passed away about 8 years ago, but I was very connected to him. I even say in the introduction of our first book that this is what I do now with running a global nonprofit, which often involves walking into a room full of men and sticking my hand out and shaking my hand with confidence. Fathers give their daughters a level of confidence that no other person can. And so a lot of what I'm doing is because my father loved and adored me. So they both know how important they are to me in all these different areas. So we may disagree in terms of how policy works out, but not in terms of the importance of mothers and fathers. They both understand and agree on that.
My mother and I are best friends, and she and I, because she's a extremely devout Catholic, as am I, and we just talked about the same-sex attraction and how really there is no born this way, and 87% of lesbians have some kind of a daddy wound, and as did my mom. She was sexually abused by her father for over a decade, and through care and love, and I love my mom's best friend as well. My mother made the decision. She said, I couldn't live this life. It went against my Catholic understanding. So she and her best friend, they run a home share. So they still live together, but they have been celibate for 15 years. And they both have realized that homosexuality is something that happened to them and that they weren't born into it. So in my case, I've had my mom and my dad, and my mom has a wonderful friend who's also in our life as well. And so the endings can be so powerful for all of us if you do that, which Katy Faust here is talking about, is keeping the kids first, keep love at the fore, and let the consequences fall where they may. It's easier said than done because love is so poorly defined these days. But love does mean, as she said earlier in the show, standing on that fence and not jumping off onto either side. Love. And, I saw a book once about abortion, but it said, why can't we love them both? No, we can't. We can love our church teaching, and we can love truth, and we can love the humans whom God gave us in this world as well. Katie, I'm so excited. Are you speaking anywhere anytime soon that people can go watch you
Oh,
or
that people can go watch.
maybe
My
invite
well,
you to their
there's
events?
tons of stuff. Yeah, my travel schedule is a little full, so I'm like booking like 9 months out or
Okay,
something.
so I'll just say go to your website, right?
Go to the website. I have got 2 books co-authored with Stacey Manning. One about the global children's rights movement. That's just like, what does it look like in policy? The next one is like, what does it look like for your own kids? How do you protect your own kids? So both of those are available if you want more information there.
At thembeforeus.org
Thembeforeus.com
dot
is,
com.
yep. And then go to the bottom and subscribe so you can stay up on all of the ways that we are advancing the rights of children. You can go to my social media pages. I'm on Twitter a lot. Too much.
On X,
Uh,
you mean? I don't
and
know.
on X. Yes, I'm on X.
Yes.
So we're on all the social media. Go there, find us, like get equipped. Like the truth is that when it comes to defending kids, you are probably their only hope because politicians are feckless and the institutions have been captured. I mean, it's literally just ordinary you and ordinary me that's there to defend them, but it's enough. Like we are changing the conversation about all of these different issues. We are centering the child in all these conversations. You should come be a part of it because it is ordinary people like you and like us who are going to do it.
And you don't have to be the daughter of a lesbian or someone who's the child of an IVF. You can be the child of an intact family.
Right.
It's because we are fighting for truth. And when
That's
you're
right.
fighting for truth, it doesn't matter where you come from. And
This is a matter of justice, and everybody should be concerned about justice for children.
absolutely. So hold up that book again. You
This
you
is
can
the
get a
next
hold of
one. I
Katie's
should get my
latest book
other
just
one up
came
here.
out 2 days ago, Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City. You can get that, I am guessing, on Amazon and anywhere books are sold,
That's
as
correct.
well as going to thembeforeus.com.
That's it.
And your first book, which is called Them Before Us, correct?
Yes. Then before us, why we need a global children's rights movement. And yeah, that is your manual for child protection. Every single issue that has to do with marriage and family, you will be unassailable in your ability to advocate on behalf of kids. It is packed full of the highest quality social science, the testimonies of kids who have lived through these modern families, and you will be able to stand firm on their behalf.
Amen. I have two final non-questions, fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
First one, when I die, I will know my life has been a success if.
Oh,
For you,
you're asking
filling
me.
it in, fill in the blank. When I
Yeah,
die, I
well,
will know my life has been a success if.
yeah, literally my investment in my relationship with the Lord and my investment with people. That's it. Those are the two eternal things. My relationship with the Lord, my relationship, my investment in other people. Like, how have I loved God well and loved people well? That's it. That's what you take with you.
Amen. Last thing, name
Yeah.
one thing, because I don't like my listeners just to go, oh, that's a great show, and then go and eat a chocolate, right? I want to change them. So let's give them some actionable principles. Name one thing you'd have our listeners or viewers do differently as a result of something they heard today.
Every single time you see a trending news story about marriage, family, divorce, I want you to say, what about the kid? Most of the time, they're not even going to mention the kid. If they do, they'll be like, oh, the kid loves it. They're going to be great. They're so blessed. No, always think, what about the kid? Why aren't they talking about the kid? Why didn't they center the child's perspective in this conversation? And that's probably the thing we hear the most about our work is now I see everywhere how they ignore the child or throw them under the bus so adults can have what they want. Don't allow yourself to see something in the news or on your social media feed without saying, what about the kid? Let's prioritize the kid first.
Amen. Amen. You're a fire hose of information, of energy, of love, and passion. And I think God is really using you in this way. So when you die, I'll tell you what my goal is. My goal is to save 1 million marriages, but it's actually morphed recently to save 1 million souls. So when I die, I want God to say, look, and line them up. And I hope that there are 1 million there. And I believe you are well on your way to actually fulfilling that goal with me, because you can clearly see that it's not just about the kids, that you really want to save souls. You want to get people to heaven. You want to do what is right. You want to please God. And I know that he smiles down on you and says, my daughter, I'm so proud of you. You know,
Well, I will get on that bacon train, baby. I will get on that bacon train.
we could do this. We can do this. Do it all for the love of God.
Yeah.
For the love of God. So I would love for you to follow Katy, as she said, on all of her social media platforms. Go to thembeforeus.com, sign up for the newsletter. I'm surprised that I don't have that newsletter yet, because I've been
Get it,
watching you on
girl.
social media for a while. But I want you also to go to mine and share, because God has given me amazing guests like Katy. And these messages are messages that you just may not have the words to say. She said exactly what you wanted to say, but you can't come up with the words. Forward this show to those people. Say, please watch. Forward the show to your niece that's trying to have IVF. Forward this to your sibling who is contemplating divorce. Forward this to your colleague who is entering into, leaving their spouse for a same-sex relationship or whatever. This is a way that you can let us do the work for you, and all you have to do is share. Also, like me on all my social media, because you're going to get all these same amazing people there as well, and definitely here on this video platform. Now, I do want to say to sign up for Katy's newsletter as well as mine, because censorship is real. I know that I have already had at least one show shut down. I've had 3 of them censored in some way, and we are coming upon a time, because it's talked about publicly. Whoever thought when I was a child that we would be doing that? That is, I'm not supposed to say the word communism out loud, but that is what happens in communist nations. They start with shutting out voices in the media. So go and register for our newsletters, because we can at least still send them to you if they're not sending you these shows. And for any of those people who have messages that you like, don't be a passive receiver of information, just waiting to see what video they send you. You go and sign up for their newsletter so that you are receiving it, because one day you won't get the video and be like, it's been a while since I saw a video from so-and-so. So this is my way of telling you to be an active participant in society and be alert and know what's going on. So, all right.
Yeah.
I think I've talked enough.
That's good advice. It's good advice. Do everything she told you, people.
That's right. So I try to tell that to my husband. Just do what I say. Doesn't work. Okay, kidding. He's the head. He's the head. All right. So here's how we end the show. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon, and you have been watching Breakfast with Bacon. I'd like to remind you always to live your life
Sunny side up, baby.
sunny side up. Yes.